The water burned my hands, but pain and I had become old friends. I scrubbed another plate with mechanical movements, watching greasy water swirl down the drain. 8 months at Riverside Grill, a mid-sized steakhouse on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado. 8 months of scalding water, aching shoulders, and trying to forget who I used to be. Captain Elena Voss was dead. At least that's what I told myself every morning when I put on this cheap black apron. 36 years old. 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. 1 dishonorable discharge. 2 years in federal prison at Fort Leavenworth. Now dishwasher. The fall had been long and brutal. Voss. "We need more plates for the private room," shouted Mr. Delgado, the manager. "Big military group tonight. Some general from D.C. Don't fuck around back here." I didn't answer. I never did. Talking meant connecting, and connecting meant remembering. I loaded the plates into the warmer and pushed through the swinging door into the dimly lit hallway that separated the chaotic kitchen from the dining area. That's when I heard it, a voice I hadn't heard in 6 years. Low. Confident. Carrying the weight of command. She ignored direct orders from command. Walked straight into a kill zone, with only 4 men. Most officers would have called her insane. I called her one of the bravest soldiers I'd ever seen. My entire body went rigid. I knew that voice too well. Lieutenant General Marcus Hale. The man who had destroyed my career with a single signature. I moved closer to the small round window in the door. Through the glass, I could see the long private dining table. 7 men. Dress uniforms, expensive civilian suits, whiskey glasses, and the unmistakable presence of power. Hale sat at the head of the table, older now, his hair almost fully silver, but still radiating authority. He was speaking quietly, yet every word carried across the room. One of the colonels leaned forward. "You're talking about her like she was a legend, sir." "She was," Hale replied. "Captain Elena Voss. 75th Ranger Regiment, then attached to Delta Force. We called her Reaper. Not because she enjoyed death, but because she kept showing up where death was already waiting." My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to go back to the sink and disappear again. But my feet wouldn't move. "She made a call in Helmand that most people couldn't make," Hale continued. "We had a village caught in the middle of a major Taliban offensive. Command ordered an airstrike to level the entire area. Too risky to send ground forces, they said. Too many variables." He paused, swirling the whiskey in his glass. Voss refused. "She said there were civilians trapped, families, children. She took 4 volunteers and went in on foot." The table had gone completely silent. I closed my eyes. The memories came rushing back, whether I wanted them or not. The choking dust. The crack of gunfire. The screams of children. "She held a position for 6 hours," Hale said. "Fought house to house. Carried wounded men on her back. Personally dragged 23 civilians to the extraction point. 11 of our guys made it out alive because of her. She was the last one on the bird." A major shook his head. "What happened to her?" Hale's face darkened. "They needed a scapegoat. The mission made the international news for all the wrong reasons. Someone had to burn. So they burned her. Court-martialed for disobeying orders. Dishonorable discharge. 2 years in prison." He looked down. I signed the recommendation. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. At that exact moment, General Hale lifted his head and looked straight toward the hallway door. Our eyes met through the glass. His face went deathly pale in an instant. The color drained completely, leaving him ghostly white. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered loudly against the floor. "Oh my God," he whispered, voice breaking. "It's her." Every head at the table turned. I stood frozen in the hallway, dirty apron, wet hands, messy ponytail, the long scar running from my left eyebrow down to my jaw. General Hale slowly rose from his chair like a man who had seen a ghost. He walked toward the hallway door and pushed it open. The noise of the restaurant seemed to vanish. We stood less than 10 feet apart. "Elena," his voice was barely above a whisper. "Voss." "General Hale," I answered, my voice flat and cold. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. "You're alive," he finally said. Barely. He took a step closer, studying me, the scars, the hardened eyes, the woman who used to be one of his best operators now reduced to this. You've been here, washing dishes? 8 months, I said. Before that, prison. Before that, you already know. Hale's jaw tightened. Shame flickered across his face. Real, visible shame. I didn't know it got this bad, he said quietly. I thought they'd give you a quiet exit. I never imagined they'd. You signed the papers, I interrupted. You sat in that courtroom and let them call me reckless.
À danger.
A traitor. He didn't look away. For once, the powerful general didn't hide. I did, he admitted. And it was one of the worst mistakes of my life. Behind him, the other officers had gathered at the doorway, watching in stunned silence. One of them, a full colonel with a ranger tab, whispered, Reaper, Jesus Christ, it really is you. The old nickname hit me harder than I expected. General Hale straightened his back. Then, in the middle of that dirty restaurant hallway, he did something I never thought I'd see. He stood at attention and saluted me. A full, crisp, respectful salute. Captain Elena Voss, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I failed you. As a leader. As a soldier. As a man. I'm sorry. My throat tightened painfully. I hadn't cried in years, but I felt the burn behind my eyes. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. People at nearby tables were staring. I looked down at my pruned, scarred hands, then back at the general. For 8 months, I had tried to kill the soldier inside me. And in less than 5 minutes, she had come back to life with a vengeance. The silence in that narrow hallway felt heavier than any combat zone I'd ever been in. General Hale kept his hand raised in salute for several long seconds before slowly lowering it. His eyes never left mine. The other officers stood behind him like statues, unsure what to do. A full colonel with a ranger tab finally stepped forward.
Ma'am.
I was at Camp Dwyer when the reports came in. We all heard about Reaper. Never thought I'd meet you like this. I didn't respond. I had no idea what to say to these men in their clean uniforms while I stood there smelling like dish soap and grease. General Hale glanced back at the dining room, then at me. Elena, can we speak privately? Please. I wanted to say no. I wanted to walk back to my sink and pretend none of this had happened. But something in his voice, something raw and honest, made me nod. Break room. 2 minutes, I said coldly. I led him down the hallway to the small staff break room at the back. It was nothing special, just a worn couch, a coffee machine, and a bulletin board covered with employee notices. I closed the door behind us. Hale stood in the middle of the room, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit. I don't even know where to begin, he said quietly. Then don't, I replied. You already said enough out there. He shook his head.
No.
I need you to hear this. After the court-martial, I told myself I did the right thing, that the mission had to be protected, that one officer's career was a small price to pay for the bigger picture. He paused. But I was lying to myself. I was protecting my own ass. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. You threw me to the wolves, General. They stripped me of rank, took my pension, called me a traitor on national television. I spent 26 months in Leavenworth sharing a cell with a woman who stabbed her husband 37 times. And every single night, I asked myself why the man I trusted most sold me out. Hale's shoulders slumped. He looked older than his 61 years. Because I was weak, he admitted. The Pentagon wanted blood after the media storm. They needed a hero and a villain. They chose you as the villain. I let them. I laughed bitterly. And now, 6 years later, you see me washing dishes, and suddenly you feel guilty. Yes, he said without hesitation. Because I never stopped thinking about you. Your file is still marked classified in certain circles. But people talk. Some still call you a legend. Others call you a cautionary tale. I walked over to the small window and looked out into the dark parking lot. Snow had started falling lightly. You want to know what prison does to you? I asked quietly. It teaches you how to disappear while you're still breathing. I learned to speak less, trust less, feel less. I told myself Captain Elena Voss died in Helmand. The woman who walked out of that courtroom wasn't her anymore. Hale stayed silent for a moment, then spoke carefully. Tell me about that day. The real version. Not the one in the official report. I closed my eyes.
Flashback Helmand Province, Afghanistan 2019.
The sand was everywhere. In my mouth, my eyes, my rifle. We were pinned down in a crumbling village compound. Taliban fighters had us surrounded. Radio chatter was pure chaos. Reaper, this is command. Airstrike is authorized. Level the grid. Repeat, level the entire block. I stared at the village through the scope. I could see movement, women, children, old men running between houses. Our wounded were scattered across the street. Negative command. I radioed back. We have friendlies and civilians in the open. I will not drop bombs on them. Voss, that is a direct order. I looked at the 4 men with me, all volunteers. Sergeant Ramirez, Corporal Hayes, 2 young rangers who trusted me with their lives. I made the call. We're going in on foot. For the next 6 hours, we fought like hell. House by house, room by room. I carried a wounded sergeant over my shoulder while returning fire. I dragged a little girl out of a burning building while bullets tore through the doorway beside me. I held the extraction point alone for 12 minutes after the last helicopter was supposed to leave. We saved 23 civilians and 11 American soldiers that day. They called it reckless. Back in the break room, my hands were shaking. I did my job, General. I did what we swore an oath to do, protect innocent life. And they punished me for it.
Hale step closer.
I know, and I'm sorry. I was wrong. He took a deep breath. The Army is changing. We're building new special operations units focused on high-risk extractions and hostage recovery. I've been given authority to recruit. I want you back, Elena. Not as a soldier who follows blindly, but as someone who still has the courage to make the hard calls. I stared at him. You think I can just put the uniform back on after everything? I think the soldier in you never really left, he said softly. I saw it in your eyes the moment we locked gazes tonight. I looked down at my hands again, scarred, burned from hot water, rough from years of war and survival. I don't know if I still have it in me, I whispered. Hale reached into his jacket and pulled out a plain black card with only a phone number on it. This isn't an order. It's an invitation. If you want to talk more, call me. Anytime, day or night. He placed the card on the table. As he turned to leave, he stopped at the door. For what it's worth, I never stopped believing you were one of the best, even when I failed you. Then he was gone. I stood alone in the break room for a long time, listening to the distant sounds of the restaurant. The card sat on the table like a live grenade. I picked it up, turned it over in my fingers, and then slipped it into my apron pocket. That night, after my shift ended, I drove home through the falling snow to my small 1-bedroom apartment. I poured myself a glass of cheap whiskey and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. For the first time in 6 years, I allowed myself to feel something other than emptiness. Anger.
Pride. Fear. Hope.
All of them at once. I took the card out of my pocket and looked at the number again. I didn't call. Not that night. But I didn't throw the card away either. The next 3 days passed in a blur of steam, soap, and silence. I went to work like nothing had happened. I scrubbed plates, carried heavy trays, and avoided eye contact with everyone. But the black card in my apron pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Every time I reached for a rag or a clean plate, my fingers brushed against it. Mr. Delgado noticed something was off. You okay, Voss? He asked on the 3rd night. You've been quiet even for you.
Are you fine, Elid?
But I wasn't fine. That night after closing, I sat in my old pickup truck in the empty parking lot, snow falling heavily now. I pulled the card out and stared at the plain white numbers. No name, no title, just 10 digits. I dialed. It rang only twice.
Elena.
General Hale answered. He sounded like he hadn't been sleeping either. I haven't said yes, I said immediately. I know. I need to talk. Not about rejoining. About what really happened after Helmand. There was a long pause. Name the place, he said. 2 days later, we met at a quiet diner 20 miles outside Denver. Neutral ground. Early morning. almost empty except for a few truckers. Hale was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, wearing civilian clothes, a dark sweater and jacket. He looked more human this way, less like the man who had destroyed my life. I slid into the seat across from him. The waitress poured coffee and left us alone. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began. "About me still being a soldier. You're wrong." Hale raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet. "After the court-martial, they sent me to Leavenworth. The first 6 months were hell. Other inmates found out who I was. Former soldiers don't get treated kindly when labeled a traitor. I got jumped twice in the first month, broke 2 ribs the second time." I took a slow sip of coffee. But the worst part wasn't the beatings. It was the silence in my own head. I kept replaying that day in Hellmand. Every decision, every bullet, every child I pulled out of the fire. And I kept asking myself, if I had just followed orders and dropped those bombs, would I still be Captain Voss? Would I still have my life? Hale's hands tightened around his mug. "You made the right call," he said firmly. "Maybe. But right calls don't always save you." I looked out the window at the falling snow. After prison, I tried everything to disappear. Changed my name for a while. Moved to Montana for 6 months. Worked on a ranch. But the nightmares followed me. I'd wake up hearing children screaming in Pashto, smelling burning fuel and dust. So I came back to Colorado. Took the first job that didn't ask too many questions. Hale leaned forward. "Elena, I won't lie to you. The unit I'm building is dangerous. Higher risk than anything you did before. We're not just doing raids anymore. We handle situations where politics won't allow normal military involvement. Hostage recovery. Deniable operations. Places where failure means no one will come for you." He paused. "But I also won't lie about this. You're one of the best I've ever seen at making impossible choices. That's rarer than courage. That's what we need." I studied his face for a long time. "Why now?" I asked. "After 6 years. Why come looking for me?" Hale looked down at the table. "Because I'm dying, Elena." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. Doctors give me 8 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky. I've spent the last 2 years trying to fix the mistakes I made when I was more politician than soldier. You're at the top of that list." For the first time since the restaurant, I saw real vulnerability in his eyes. "I can't change what happened to you," he continued. "But I can give you back your name, your honor, your rank, full restoration, and a chance to do what you do best again." I felt something crack inside my chest. "I don't know if I can trust the army again," I said quietly. "Then don't trust the army," he replied. "Trust me. One last time." Flashback, Leavenworth Federal Prison, 2021. The cell was cold. Concrete walls. Metal toilet. A tiny window with bars. I sat on the edge of my bunk every night, cleaning my scarred hands with a rough towel. The woman in the bunk above me, Maria, was serving life for murder. "You really a soldier?" she asked me one night. "Yeah." "Then why the hell you in here with us monsters?" I didn't answer for a long time. "Because sometimes the monsters wear medals," I finally said. Maria laughed bitterly. "Welcome to the club, Reaper." Back in the diner, Hale slid an envelope across the table. "Medical records. Mission briefings. Everything. Read it. Then call me." I didn't open it right away. Instead, I drove home through the snow and sat at my small kitchen table for hours. The envelope lay unopened in front of me. That night, the nightmares returned worse than ever. I was back in Hellmand, carrying a dying boy in my arms while bullets ripped past my head. General Hale's voice on the radio ordering me to pull out. My own voice screaming that I wouldn't leave people behind. I woke up gasping, covered in sweat. At 4:17 a.m., I opened the envelope. Inside were classified documents, after-action reports, and a personal letter from Hale written 2 weeks earlier. It read,
Elena.
"If you're reading this, then maybe there's still hope for an old man to make things right. You were never the problem. We were. Come back and help me fix what we broke. Not for me. For the ones who still need someone willing to walk into hell."
Marcus Hale.
I folded the letter slowly. For the first time in 6 years, I felt the old fire, quiet, burning, undeniable, return to my chest. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I was sure of one thing. Captain Elena Voss wasn't dead after all. She had just been waiting. The decision didn't come dramatically. There was no lightning strike moment, no swelling music in my head. Just a quiet Tuesday morning, 3 days after the diner meeting. I stood in my tiny kitchen, drinking black coffee, staring at the snow-covered mountains in the distance. Then I picked up my phone and texted General Hale one word: talk. He replied within minutes. We met at a secure military annex just outside Colorado Springs, a low, unmarked building that looked like any other government facility.
No flags.
No signs. Just heavy security and men with hard eyes. Hale was waiting for me in a small briefing room. He looked weaker than before. The cancer was already carving away at him. You came, he said, a faint smile on his lips. I'm not promising anything, I replied. I want to see what you're really offering. He nodded and slid a folder across the table. Inside were my official reinstatement documents, backdated, full restoration of rank, honors, and pension. All it needed was my signature. There was also a mission brief. Operation Shadow Veil. A new joint task force focused on high-risk extractions in denied areas, places where conventional forces couldn't go. Hostages. Captured operators. Political prisoners. Situations too sensitive for public acknowledgement. I read through the files in silence. My hands started shaking slightly when I saw the team roster. You kept Ramirez, I said quietly. Sergeant First Class Diego Ramirez. One of the 4 men who had followed me into hell in Helmand. He never stopped asking about you, Hale said. He's one of the instructors now. I closed the folder. I want to see the training facility. And I want to speak to Ramirez. Alone.
Hale didn't argue.
2 hours later, I stood inside a massive indoor training complex disguised as a private security company. The smell of gun oil, sweat, and cold concrete hit me like an old memory. Ramirez was waiting on the shooting range. He looked older, harder, a thick beard, and a new scar running across his neck. When he saw me, he froze. Reaper, he whispered. I nodded once. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he crossed the distance in 3 strides and pulled me into a crushing hug. Goddamn Captain, he said, voice thick. I thought they killed you in there. They tried. He stepped back, holding me at arm's length, studying my face. You look different, he said. So do you. We walked outside to a quiet area behind the facility. Snow crunched under our boots. I read the reports, Ramirez said. What they did to you, it was bullshit. We all knew it. Half the regiment wanted to riot when they court-martialed you. But nobody spoke up, I said, not accusing, just stating fact. He looked ashamed. We were told it would destroy our careers. I was young. Stupid.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
I shook my head. It's in the past. Tell me about this new unit. Ramirez leaned against a concrete barrier. It's different. Smaller teams. More autonomy. But the missions are darker. We go in when everyone else is ordered to stay out. Last month we lost 2 guys in Syria. Good men. He looked at me carefully. You thinking about coming back? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to burn everything down and walk away. The other part misses it. The purpose. Ramirez smiled sadly. You were always the one who made us believe we could still do good. Even in the middle of all that shit. We stood in silence for a while, watching snow fall on the training grounds. That evening, General Hale took me to a private room overlooking the mountains. I'm not going to pressure you, he said, but I need an answer in the next 48 hours. The first mission is in 10 days. What's the target? I asked. An American aid worker and 2 journalists held by a militant group in Eastern Africa. Official policy is no negotiation. But unofficially, we're sending a small team. I looked at him. And if I say yes, then you'll lead it. My stomach tightened.
Me?
I've been washing dishes for 8 months. You've been surviving, Hale corrected. That's more than most men can say after what you went through. He coughed hard, covering his mouth with a handkerchief. When he pulled it away, there was a small spot of blood. I'm running out of time, Elena, he said quietly. I need to know I fix at least one thing before I go. Flashback, Fort Leavenworth, 2022. I stood in the visitation room, staring at my younger sister through the glass. She was crying. Why won't you let us help you? She begged. Because there's nothing left to help, I answered. Captain Voss is gone. Don't look for her anymore. I hung up the phone and walked away. That was the last time I spoke to any family. Back in the present, I drove home that night with my mind spinning. I sat on the floor of my apartment surrounded by old photos I hadn't looked at in years. Me in uniform. My old team. A picture of me carrying a wounded soldier during training, smiling like I still believed the world could be saved. At 2:30 a.m., I made my decision. I called Hale. I'm in, I said. But on one condition. Name it. I do this my way. No politics.
No scapegoats.
If things go bad, I take full responsibility. Hale was quiet for a moment. You have my word. The next morning, I reported for reactivation. They gave me back my old call sign, Reaper. As I stood in the armory, feeling the weight of tactical gear again after so many years, something inside me shifted. I wasn't the same woman who had gone to prison. I was harder, angrier, more dangerous. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to walk back into hell one more time. But this time, I wouldn't go in blindly. This time, I would make sure the people who once betrayed me understood exactly what they had brought back to life. The following week was brutal. They didn't ease me back in. They threw me into the deep end. 12-hour training days. Close quarters combat drills. Night runs in full gear through freezing Colorado forests. My body screamed at me every morning, but I pushed harder. The soldier I had buried for 6 years was waking up angry and hungry. Ramirez trained with me personally. You're still fast, he said after I dropped him during a hand-to-hand session. But you're different now. Meaner. Good, I replied, wiping sweat from my eyes. Mean keeps you alive. General Hale watched most sessions from the observation room, growing weaker by the day. He rarely spoke, but I felt his eyes on me constantly, a mix of pride and guilt. On the 8th day, he called me into his office. The mission was greenlit. Operation Shadow Veil, Eastern Africa. A remote compound held by a radical militant group. 1 American aid worker and 2 journalists. The U.S. government publicly refused to negotiate. Unofficially, they sent us. You'll lead a 6-person team, Hale said, sliding the mission packet across the desk. Ramirez will be your second. In and out in under 48 hours. No support. No extraction if it goes loud. I looked at the satellite images. The compound was heavily guarded. This isn't a rescue, I said. This is a suicide run if things go wrong.
Hale nodded slowly.
That's why I wanted you. Most operators today follow orders too cleanly. You don't. I met his eyes. If I do this, and it goes bad, will you burn me again? No, he said firmly. My last act as a general will be to make sure that doesn't happen. You have my word. I believed him. The mission, 72 hours later. The night was black and suffocating. We inserted by halo jump 30 kilometers from the target. 6 shadows falling through the sky like death itself. When we hit the ground, the only sound was the soft crunch of boots on dry earth. I took point. My heart was steady. The old instincts returned like they had never left. Every shadow, every sound, every shift in the wind. I felt it all. We moved like ghosts for 6 hours. When we reached the compound, the real fight began. It went loud faster than we wanted. An alert guard spotted us during the breach. Within seconds, the night exploded with gunfire. Contact, Ramirez shouted. I moved on instinct, clearing rooms, dropping targets with precise shots, covering my team as we pushed toward the hostage building. Bullets whipped past my head. One grazed my left arm, burning like fire. But I didn't stop. We found the hostages in the basement, beaten, terrified, but alive. Reaper, we've got them, Ramirez called. Exfil now. I ordered. The retreat was hell. Militants swarmed us from every direction. We fought our way to the secondary extraction point, a narrow valley where a stealth helicopter was supposed to meet us.
Only it didn't come on time.
We held position for 20 agonizing minutes under heavy fire. I took another round to my vest. The impact knocked the wind out of me. That's when I made the call. Ramirez, take the hostages and move to the fallback ridge. I'll buy you time. Captain, no. That's an order. I stayed behind with one other operator, laying down suppressive fire as the team pulled back. Bullets tore chunks out of the rocks around me. My ears rang. My body burned. For a moment, I thought this was it, that I would die here in a foreign valley, proving once again that I was willing to walk into hell. Then I heard the sweet sound of rotor blades. The Black Hawk came in hot, guns blazing. We loaded the hostages and climbed aboard under heavy fire. As we lifted off, I looked back at the burning compound. I had done it again. Brought people home when everyone else said it was impossible. 3 days later, I stood in a private hospital room in Colorado Springs. General Marcus Hale lay in the bed, pale and thin, but his eyes were clear. He had waited for my return before allowing them to increase his pain medication. "You did it," he said weakly, a proud smile on his face. "We did it," I corrected. "The team performed perfectly." He reached out a trembling hand. I took it.
"I'm sorry, Elena."
"For everything. I was supposed to protect soldiers like you. Instead, I failed you." I squeezed his hand gently. "You made it right in the end. That's more than most men ever do." Tears welled in his eyes. "Reaper, you are always the best of us. Don't ever let them take that away from you again." Those were the last words he spoke to me. General Marcus Hale died 4 days later. At his funeral, I stood in full dress uniform for the first time in 6 years. My restored rank gleamed on my chest. Ramirez stood beside me. Dozens of operators and soldiers attended. When they played taps, I didn't cry. Instead, I whispered to the wind, "Thank you for giving me back my name." Epilogue 3 months later. I stood on a ridge overlooking the Colorado mountains, wearing civilian clothes again. The wind was cold and clean. After Hale's death, I was offered a permanent position with a new unit. Leadership track. Training command. Everything I could have wanted. I turned it down. Not because I was done being a soldier, but because I finally understood something important. I didn't need the uniform to be Reaper. I didn't need their permission to be who I was. Some nights, I still wash dishes at Riverside Grill when I wanted to feel grounded. Mr. Delgado never asked questions. He just gave me extra shifts when I needed silence. Other nights, I trained new operators. I taught them what Hale could never teach them, that sometimes the hardest thing isn't following orders. It's knowing when to break them. My name is Elena Voss. Former dishwasher. Former prisoner. Former ghost.
Now,
I'm just a woman who walks into hell when someone needs to come home. And I still answer to Reaper.